So tell me a little bit about your family, because you grew up in New Mexico, didn't you?
I did indeed. I was born in a little town called Cloudcroft, New Mexico. It's a little 200 or 300 people in the mountains of southern New Mexico. But I grew up in a little town called Portales, New Mexico, Portales. And I'm the middle of 5 kids, and just sort of grew up lower middle class people. My dad was a truck driver, and then a carpenter, and a maintenance man, and there you have it.
Were they quite a creative family, would you say?
No. We were a pretty uneducated family. I'm one of the first people on either side of my family ever to go to college, much less graduate. And I grew up, it was a largely a family that grew up without books, really. Although my dad did play guitar, but he played sort of for square dances and stuff like that.
Was it your dad that got you into playing?
It's sort of him. Most people don't realize this, but where I grew up in Portales, miles north of that, and Clovis, New Mexico, in the late 50s and early 60s, was a hotbed of recording. It's not generally known, but I was actually at the recording session when Buddy Holly cut Peggy Sue.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and there were a lot of artists. I don't know if you know Sugar Shack or the Fireballs and Jimmy Dale Gilmore and people like that. They were all cutting in Clovis, New Mexico, which is 19 miles away. And when I was in high school, Norman Petty, the Norman Petty Studios singing group I was with, at an exchange assembly, and hired us to sing backups on record for a girl named Hope Griffin. So I was singing backup on records when I was in high school. I had a rock and roll band back in those days, Ron's Rockouts, and 3 of us in the band were brothers. My older brother Rick was my bass player, and I was the leader of the band, the lead singer, and then my younger brother Mike was the lead guitarist.
Oh, wow. And did you make any records yourself?
No. We just played around, we were just playing around Portales there while I was in high school and college, and then because I was majoring in theater and doing all that stuff, but I was always playing music at the same time when I was studying theater.
And what made you study theatre in particular?
Well, I always knew my whole life. I was here at Madre when I was about 12 or 13 years old, and from that moment on, knew that I wanted to be an actor.
Was there any other films as well that really made an influence on you when you were growing up?
Not really. I grew up watching old Western movies, Gene Autry, Roy Rogers, and those kind of films. No great artistic things. That's the reason Treasure of Sierra Madre was just so different from those, because all of a sudden I was seeing a quality movie instead of a B Western.
And were your family quite supportive of you wanting to be an actor?
No, they always actually after I went to college, they always thought I was sort of throwing my life away to get educated and then not be to be an actor. It seemed a total waste of time and effort.
What were your first jobs in acting?
Well, when I was in college, I got there was a melodrama company up in Colorado that I got a job there, $20 a week and room and board to go up and do old-time melodramas at this tourist town up in Colorado. I did that when I was in college. Then when we got out of college, Mary and I went back east. My wife Mary, brilliant woman, fellowship at Sloan Kettering at Georgetown University, and she was working on her PhD in chemistry, and I started to work at a place actually a quite famous place in Washington D.C. called Arena Stage. It's considered one of the finest theaters in America outside of New York, but I went there as what they euphemistically basically call a production intern, which was basically a glorified word for slave. Then became an assistant stage manager, and occasionally got to play little tiny. We were there in Washington D.C. for 6 years, and basically at the end of 6 years, I could read a script and whatever. If I was going to get to play a role, it would be the smallest role in the play.
Right.
And so it was one of those things where, I think it's part of the thing is you can't make good where you started out. They always see you as this guy that was a pure, pretty much novice, and they don't see any sort of growth that happens. Anyway, 6 years of that, and then Mary got her PhD. So then we went to New York, and I managed to get a little tiny role in a Broadway show. And while Mary, a postdoctoral fellowship with Sloan Kettering in New York, which is it's a really world famous cancer research organization. So she was doing 4-year postdoc work while I was in New York, and I had that little role. Then I was doing Broadway and off-Broadway and Shakespeare in the Park, stuff like that. And that's when John Boorman came to New York looking for good unknown actors for Deliverance, and God knows I was unknown. So so I managed to get a role in that, and then it changed my life rather dramatically because I'd been a struggling actor. I didn't get my first film until I was 32.
Wow.
It was Ned Beatty's first film, too. I don't know if you know that.
No, I didn't know that, actually, no.
Yeah, and we were cast totally independently of each other. They didn't even know we knew each other, and Ned and I had already done like 20 plays together at Arena Stage.
Do you think working in the theatre was of benefit to you? Do you think it helped you as an actor? A lot of people go straight into films, don't they? They go to a stage school and then they go straight into films. Do you think that the theatre experience was a big benefit for you?
No, I went to a little tiny small school in New Mexico, and basically I'm not a really well-trained actor. In terms of classical training or anything like that, what I feel I have going for me is a sense of honesty about the work. So, but in terms of being a really well-trained actor, I'm not.
But do you think working on the stage in theatres helped?
Oh, absolutely, especially working on the stage at Arena Stage, because that's theater in the round. And a lot of people who just have their training in the theater, proscenium arch theaters and stuff like that, it's sort of what I call acting with only one little part of your body. You're sort of trying to work out a way to and I mean the stage acting requires a whole lot of techniques that you can master, but they aren't techniques that work necessarily that much for film.
I see.
And I'll tell you something that you probably have never heard before. I'm one of the few actors who think that you have to be a much, much more accomplished actor to work on film and television than you do on stage. On stage, that you cannot get away with on film. And so therefore, you can take any really good film actor, as far as I'm concerned, and he might need some training about projecting and some of the technical aspects, but he'll still be good on stage. Unfortunately, the opposite is not true. Fabulous stage actors, and they're a positive embarrassment.
Right.
And I can give you a prime example, and it'll sound like heresy, because as far as I'm concerned, now, Sir Laurence Olivier may well have been one of the great stage actors of all time. But I can tell you, as a matter of fact, he's a positive embarrassment as a film actor.
I always found him very, very hammy on TV and film.
He's terrible.
Yeah.
I sometimes go and see a film called The Betsy, or see the production of Cat on the Hot Tin Roof that I think now. Having said that, and I know I'm treading on hallowed ground here, but there are other actors. Sir John Gielgud, a wonderful stage actor as well, and sort of a contemporary of Sir Laurence Olivier. Sir John Gielgud, not only is he a great stage actor, but he was also a really, really great film actor too. So I'm not saying that being a great stage actor, I'm just saying that in terms of what I know, I've done both. Done both a lot. And I know that you have to be a way more accomplished actor on film than you do. Because here's the thing. If you're doing a stage, say there's 1,800 seats, no one past about the third or fourth row can see what's going on in your eyes.
Yeah, that's true.
You're out there making gestures and doing stuff. So it becomes more sort of film acting. When that camera comes in and it's close on there better be something going on behind your eyes.
Yeah.
And if it's not going on there, and that's when if you're just up there gesturing and as Hamlet said to the players, just sawing the air, then you failed at that aspect of acting.
Yeah, I see. So when John first came to you, then how did he introduce himself?
Well, I was the first actor they saw in New York. They came to New York looking for, and I was so unknown. And the reason I was the first actor they saw is not because I was the top of anyone's list, but because I was the bottom of the list. They were going to start seeing people at 10 o'clock in the morning on some day, and they asked me to come at 9 o'clock just to see if I was worth seeing.
Right.
And I met with the casting director, and he gave me a copy of the script and told me to go away to a coffee shop and come back later. I came back later and met with John Boorman, and then ended up meeting with John Boorman 2 or 3 more times during that week. And I have to tell you the truth, the fact that I could play guitar was also instrumental, pun intended, in my getting the job. And so eventually they flew a bunch of us from New York out here to California and tested us for the 4 roles. Out of that screen test, they tested about 15 or 16 of us for the 4 roles. I was the only one that they liked out of that whole group. And then a couple of weeks later, they were still looking for people, and they found Ned in Washington, D.C. They found me first, and they found Ned, and then we waited around for another 4 or 5 weeks while they were deciding on who was going to play the other 2 roles, and then they finally decided on Bert and John.
What was it like? I mean, it was your first film. Was it quite daunting to, be in a film with Burt Reynolds and John Dwight and...
Well, John, you got to realize at that time Burt Reynolds wasn't a big star. As a matter of fact, he was. I don't know if you can remember this, but back in those days, Burt was sort of known as a. I mean, he was a star. Don't get me wrong, he was a star, but he was a television actor. If you were a television actor in those days, you were sort of a cut or 2 below film actors.
Yeah.
And so in many ways, Deliverance was as big a break for Burt as it was, and John Boyd, of course, had done Midnight Cowboy the year before, so he was on his. But they all want. John Boorman wanted sort of not established people that much, and so. But the thing about Deliverance that most people don't realize, we shot that film in sequence. Never happened before nor since.
Oh wow! So yeah, just like in the film, then the same order.
Yeah, well, and we did all the canoeing ourselves. There's no stuntmen.
Right. Okay.
In many ways, since it was my first film and Ned's my first time in front of a camera, sometimes it was hard to remember that we were making a film because we went down there and got in the canoes every day and we're going around doing the stuff. It was sort of mind-boggling stuff because I mean, I've done a lot of films since then. I've never done one that was sort of, we're almost out playing Boy Scout.
Yeah, were you quite comfortable? I mean, were you quite outdoorsy anyway as a person? Were you quite comfortable?
Yeah, all four of us are really pretty good athletes, and we had 2 weeks of canoe practice before we started. Mm-hmm. And that's another thing too. Another reason to shoot it in sequence, because if you recall in the film, the rapids get harder and harder as we went along, and so by the time we got to the really hard rapids, the really difficult rapids, we'd all been on the water for 6 or 8 hours a day for 5 or 6 or 8 weeks.
Oh, okay.
So we all sort of pretty much knew what we were doing. Although I got to tell you the truth too, John Boyd and I, we were in a wooden Old Town canoe, which is not even intended for white water. It's a lake canoe, and because of that, we turned over a lot. I mean, I'd say about 50-60% of the time we dumped in the water, and we've wrecked 6 or 8 canoes. And you know, in the film at the end where they find that canoe broken in half, mm-hmm. We did that.
Oh wow!
They didn't have to do that. We did that.
Did anyone actually get hurt though?
Yeah, we all did.
Yeah.
Bert, really messed up his hip, and had I almost drowned once. Ned almost drowned once. I mean, we were lucky. See, that was the other thing about John Boorman in those days. Now he's since changed his mind, but John's feeling about making a film was that if you were doing a shot that was so dangerous that you needed stuntmen, that you probably shouldn't be doing that shot. Right. So once we did it, he realizes how much we dodged the bullet in that, because we literally, there were a lot of things that could have gone wrong, because we were down there with basically no way for anyone to help us. Another thing we found is if there were anyone down there to sort of rescue you in case you got in trouble, they were in the shot.
All right, yeah.
So they couldn't be there. So you pretty much were on your own a lot of times, and some of those rapids, especially if we're wooden Old Town canoe, some of those rapids, I mean, you're sort of almost risking your life to run them.
Yeah. There's a few famous scenes in the film, and I have to talk about the Julian Banjos one, obviously. How many goes did it take to get that one right?
Banjos?
Yeah, how many takes?
We shot it for 2 or 3 days. I mean, because first of all, neither Billy nor I are playing. You realize that.
Oh, yes, it was a guy behind him that was playing, wasn't it?
No.
No?
That's another one of those myths. The song was pre-recorded.
Oh, right.
By Eric Weisberg and Steve Mandel.
Oh, I see.
Now, since Billy didn't even know enough about the banjo we didn't even have real strings on the banjo.
All right.
He's sitting on a porch swing with his arm behind his back as tightly as he can get it. There's another little kid that knows something about the banjo that has the wardrobe shirt on his left arm, and he's reaching up and sort of pretending like he's moving his fingers. But if you notice, anytime they're cutting the fingers, they're cutting to mine, because the Steve Mandel, who played the guitar, taught it to me note for note. So did I play it? Yes. Is that me on the soundtrack? No. Did it cost me about $1 million? Yes. So we were faking that, and that's a big, huge scene. And with all of those, Edward Rainey dancing, and John and Voight, John and Bird and Ned and all the people around. So yeah, it took us a while to do it, and it was the first film we shot. It was the first thing we shot in the movie.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, because we shot it in sequence.
Of course, yeah, it was right at the start, wasn't it?
So here I am doing that big scene, my very first time in front of a camera.
And there's the other scene as well where they pull your body out of the water and your arm's sort of twisted up behind you, it's like dislocated. How did they do that? Was that a fake arm?
No, I had polio when I was young, and my shoulder comes out of place. That's actually me.
Oh, wow.
So when I got down to Georgia, the original concept that John Boorman wanted for when they find Drew drowned. His image that he was thinking of was with Drew being face up in the water with his eyes open. So I was being fitted with false eyeballs, so that I could look like my eyes were open. While they were doing that, I said to John Boorman, I said, I can do a really weird thing with my shoulder. And I showed him, and he almost fell down. And I mean, a lot of people think that's the worst prosthetic they've ever seen, but that's just actually me.
Oh, wow. And were you quite surprised at the success of the film?
No, everybody knew that was going to be. Every major actor in the world wanted those 4 roles. But you got and we were nominated for Academy Award that year. Of course, we were also in competition with The Godfather.
Yes.
So we weren't going to win. But no, we all knew that this was. But the problem was, see, for that time, because of the homosexual rape, it was almost, especially in the South, kind of considered almost a porno movie, and it sort of freaked a lot of Southern guys out.
Yeah,
to tell you the truth. And but what it did for both me and unbelievable. I mean, I went from all of a sudden I was being offered roles that I would never even have heard of before.
Well, you've been in quite a few films, haven't you? I mean, it's over 100, isn't it?
Yeah, close to 150 movies and television shows.
You were in a film about Woody Guthrie, weren't you?
Bound for Glory.
Yeah. And did you get that role because you could play as well?
Yes, of course.
Yeah? And were you a big fan of Woody's?
I was indeed.
Yeah.
I grew up playing his music. I'm to this day I'm friends with Arlo and with Nora. Arlo, of course, is his son, and Nora is his daughter. And I go just about every year to the Woody Guthrie Folk Festival in Okemo, Oklahoma, which is where Woody was born. And plus, I have to tell you, too, that film was directed by Hal Ashby. And Hal Ashby may be my favorite director I've ever worked with. I mean, he just, and if you look at all those films, in the 70s when he was making those films, nearly every favorite film of mine was directed by Hal Ashby. Coming Home, Being There, The Last Detail, Shampoo, Harold and Maude. I mean, talk about great films.
And what about his directing style did you like?
Well, he's the most collaborative and just allows you to do your best work and the most supportive guy that's there. And I got to tell you the truth. I was on that Bound for Glory for like 8 or 10 months, and the kind of confidence I never felt like I did a bad take. That's how much confidence he gives you. I mean, you do a take, and he comes in and says, "That's great. You want to do it again?"
And how did that contrast with John Boorman then when he directed you? What was he like?
Oh, John Boorman, same as. I mean, John Boorman, see, we largely improvised Deliverance, although I'm not implying at all that John Boorman wasn't in absolute, total, strict control of it. But we had 2 weeks of rehearsal before that film started, where we went through every scene, broke down every scene with the 4 of us, and we, every one of us knew every line backwards and so that you were always free to sort of say the line as you would there, as long as it didn't mess up the play and as long as it didn't mess up your fellow actors. And so you always had that freedom. And then, of course, then John Boorman would say either that worked or it didn't work, and then you would go on from there. But there was always a real collaborative feeling about that film as well, although collaborative with John Boorman being the arbiter of the collaboration.
And I think it's quite funny because in your early days of film, well, your early films rather, you sort of played quite laid-back characters, didn't you? But then after a while, you started to play really sort of authoritative sort of business. Yeah.
Well, I see in many ways that was the thing, especially back in those days. I mean, there's a big tendency in Hollywood, especially in those days, but still to a certain extent, to sort of typecast you. And since I played Drew, the sensitive, moral one in Deliverance, for some reason, if you played any sort of sensitivity, especially in those days, sensitivity in Hollywood got equated with weak.
Mm.
So if you played a character that had any sort of sensitivity, then that was known as a, quote, soft character.
Mm.
And so after Deliverance came out, for about the next 10 years, I played Mr. Boy Scout nice guy in films because I was known as this sensitive, nice, and this Robocop was as big a boon to my career as Deliverance was, because now all of a sudden I got to play this guy that was, and because there's sort of been 10 years of residual goodwill built up from audiences seeing my character and saying, "Oh, this is going to be a good guy," and then all of a sudden when he was bad, then he was Dick Jones was sort of worse than worse. So now once I played Dick Jones, then I got offered everything.
Mm.
The enforcement droid, Series 209, is a self-sufficient law enforcement robot. 209 is currently programmed for urban pacification, but that is only the beginning. After a successful tour of duty in old Detroit, we can expect 209 to become the hot military product for the next decade.
And then there was a period there for about, 5 or 6 or 8 years in the 80s and 90s where I was in every film made.
Yeah, you've sort of become a sci-fi icon, haven't you? Because you've been in films like Total Recall as well.
Total Recall, Onion Field, Taps, Murder 1600. I've been really, really blessed that I've been in some really good quality films. Beverly Hills Cop, Robocop, you know.
Yeah. So, which one was your favourite film you did in the 80s? Stand out for you, memory-wise, as a really good experience?
Let me ask you, do you have children?
I've got cats.
Huh?
I've got a couple of cats.
Okay, which one's your favorite?
Oh, yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, you can't really pick one, can you?
No. Because each one has its own needs and its own sort of the thing that you have to approach it from. I could never, and then sometimes, I mean, that's the reason I've always said I've been really selective about the films I do, but that's not to say that I don't do crap. It's just that I don't do crap on purpose.
Yeah.
I mean, because sometimes there's every reason in the world to do for instance, I once did a film that I didn't particularly like the film. I wasn't knocked out by the director, and I wasn't knocked out by my role. But every scene I had was with Gene Hackman.
Oh, I see, yeah.
So why would I not want to be able to be in a scene or sometimes there's a really kind of terrible movie, but it has a really challenging me to so I might want to do that. Or sometimes there's a film that's not very good, or a film that's really a film that's not very good, but it's a chance to work with a really good director. I mean, there's just all kinds of reasons but I can honestly say I've never took a job for the money, but sometimes there could be a really weird reason for wanting to do it.
Oh, I see. I mean, I know you're touring with your band, aren't you? Music's a big part of your life now.
Exactly. I'm about to leave. Again, I just got home yesterday, day before yesterday, and I'm about to leave tomorrow morning. And then I'm going to New England this weekend, and the weekend after that, I'm in Minnesota. So basically, right around Minneapolis and through there. But I play every year up in Brainerd and through there.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah.
Central Lakes College there. And yeah, I like playing in Minnesota.
Are there any musicians around at the moment that you really like? New ones that are coming through?
Well, probably not musicians that you've heard of, because I'm more in the folk music field, so none that are, there's always just a niche of folk music, acoustic oriented. So I'm not a big fan of big pop music. Although this year, I did a television show this year where I picked and sang. I did a show called Nashville.
Oh yeah.
And I got to pick and sing on that show, because these days I don't act that much because I'd rather play music. But if I get to act and sing, then I, like last year. Last year I did a little television movie with Willie Nelson, and I got to pick and sing in that as well as act. So what I do.
Ooh, ooh, ooh. True, you're right, the finest horse I've ever seen, standing 16, 1 or 2, with eyes wild and green. You're right, the horse so well, hands light to the touch. I could never go with you, no matter how I wanted to. Ride on, see you. I could never go with you, no matter how I wanted to. Ride on, see you. I could never go with you, no matter how I wanted to. Ride on, see you. I could never go with you, no matter how I wanted to. Ride on, see you. I could never go with you, no matter how I wanted to. Ride on, see you. I could never go with you, no matter how I wanted to. Ride on, see you. I could never go with you, no matter how I wanted to. When you ride into the night without a trace behind, run your claw along my gut. One last time I turned to face an empty space where you used to lie. Look for the spark that lights the night through the teardrop in my eye. Ride on, see you. I could never go with you, no matter how I wanted to. Ride on, see you. I could never go with you, no matter how I wanted to. No matter how I wanted to. No matter how I wanted